around the country and around the world. A federal judge in Phoenix blocked key provisions of Arizona's notorious anti-immigrant law on Wednesday, hours before it was scheduled to take effect. U.S. District Judge Susan Bolton ruled a partial injunction would apply to the portion of the law that requires police officers to stop and interrogate anyone they suspect is an undocumented immigrant. The ruling came in response to an injunction requested by the Obama administration, which had argued in a lawsuit that the law was unconstitutional and warned the provisions would result in racial profiling. The law sparked mass protests across the country and a boycott of Arizona. Yesterday, demonstrators filled the streets outside the courthouse in Phoenix and in front of the state capitol. Judge Bolton said in her 36-page decision that it was not in the public interest for Arizona to enforce provisions that preempt federal enforcement of immigration law. Also put on hold were parts of the law that requiring foreigners to apply for or carry certain documents, making it a state crime for undocumented workers to solicit, apply for, or perform work, and mandating verification of the immigration status of any arrested person prior to release. Bolton ruled a partial injunction should apply until the issues are resolved by the courts. The ruling meant that other portions of the law, known as Senate Bill 1070, took effect on midnight. Among them are provisions that prohibit state authorities from limiting enforcement of federal immigration laws, a provision that makes it a crime to impede traffic by picking up day laborers, and a part of the law that creates misdemeanor crimes for harboring and transporting undocumented immigrants.
Well, it's obviously it's a little bump in the road, I believe, and that, until I get my whole arms around it, we don't really exactly know where we're going to go. We knew, regardless of what happened today, of course, that one side or the other side was going to appeal. So this begins the process.
That was Arizona Governor Jan Brewer responding to the court's decision. Arizona State Representative David Gowan, who helped to get the law passed, said he was surprised by the judge's ruling.
I have no understanding why she came out with that decision, but I am kind of surprised the way she was hinting at, well, we might do partial, maybe not all of it. Yeah, I was thinking partial, but I never thought the heart of the bill was going to be touched. And it is surprising because that affects the whole law enforcement ability. The federal government, again, is dictating down, and an appointed judge is telling the will of the people no.
Advocacy groups said major protests and acts of civil disobedience against the law are scheduled to take place across Arizona today. It began last night when 4 protesters brought Phoenix to a standstill after scaling a construction crane some 20 stories high to unfurl a large banner that read, "Stop Hate." Police shut down several streets in the downtown area and arrested the 4 protesters. For more, we go now to Arizona to speak with Isabel Garcia, the co-chair of the Coalition for Human Rights and legal defender of Pima County, Arizona. She joins us from Tucson, where she's just come from an all-night vigil at the state building there. Isabel, welcome to Democracy Now! First of all, explain exactly what the judge ruled. What was ruled illegal and what stands in this Arizona law that went into effect last night at midnight?
Good morning, Amy. As you've correctly already stated, I'll say it in other words. I think the judge ruled that Arizona government cannot simply state this is going to be a police state for all people of color. That was very clear that she will not allow the state of Arizona to have police officers stop me and then engage in this inquiry on my status because they may have a reasonable suspicion that I may be here in violation. She struck that down. No police state in Arizona. Secondly, that's very important, she said you cannot criminalize undocumented immigrants. That was very clear. You cannot simply say you're a criminal because you don't have a document with you. And thirdly, she said you cannot criminalize work, which I think is very vital as well, that we will not allow the state of Arizona, in order to impact immigration, to say that people that are soliciting work will be tagged as a criminal. So I think it really does strike at the heart of what this legislature has done, what the governor has done, and really has provided the checks and balances that we demand in this country, and that really would have that has stopped really Arizona from falling off a precipice here in terms of human rights and civil rights for all of us. In addition to not permitting the state of Arizona to simply decide they're going to implement their own immigration categories, their own immigration laws, I think it was a real no-brainer. It was very clear that this was a grab, a power grab at something that only the federal government has power to enforce.
Isabel Garcia, she also appeared to knock down the state's argument that this law could be enforced without racial profiling, because she said at one point in her decision there is a substantial likelihood that officers will wrongly arrest legal resident aliens. And she went on to say by enforcing this statute, Arizona would impose a distinct, unusual, and extraordinary burden on legal resident aliens that only the federal government has the authority to impose. Your reaction to that part of her decision?
That's absolutely. Yes, we read that part of her decision. It's very clear that she saw through all of the affidavits by police officers and police chiefs. In addition, she indicated she saw the entire training video, and that was her decision that, in fact, this could not be applied without these kind of violations of our constitutional rights. Those of us that do have authorization to be here, that we would be subject to, like I said, a police state.
Talk about the parts of SB 1070 that are going into effect, Isabel, and how it affects Arizona.
Well, unfortunately, she did not enjoin the whole thing, and it was very clear in July 22nd that she was not going to do so. She is going to permit, and of course it went into effect today at midnight, the portion that says that undocumented workers that are in the corners, the day laborers, they cannot impede traffic. That is a violation, a state misdemeanor offense that she's going to permit to be enforced. Here in Tucson, for instance, we have a day laborer center where, fortunately, cars can drive into a private parking lot at a church and can exit that. But, of course, we are really concerned about the many workers who stand at a corner not to commit crimes, not to assault, not to sell drugs, but simply to seek work. Unfortunately, that is going to be a crime, and I think it's really important that we stand with those day laborers. Secondly, we were very concerned that she did not enjoin the provision of the law, of the new law, that says it is a misdemeanor offense to encourage, harbor, or transport undocumented immigrants. In other words, those of us that live in mixed families, mixed communities where we have undocumented, documented, and citizens, all of us mixed in a community and within families, that we will be subjected to a criminal offense, a misdemeanor offense, but nonetheless an offense. This is going to give, of course, Sheriff Arpaio, who indicates that even with or without 1070, he's going to continue with his massive unconstitutional crime sweeps and immigration sweeps. Of course, it's going to give him 2 additional crimes now that he thinks he can enforce.
We want to go to a clip of the sheriff, of Arpaio, but we will try to pull that up in a bit. Juan?
Isabel, I'd like to ask you what you think are the prospects now, because obviously Governor Jan Brewer has said she expects to appeal. That'll go to the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals for the Western region. Can you talk about what you think the prospects there would be with the Court of Appeals?
Well, I believe firmly that the 9th Circuit, even the Supreme Court, would go ahead and affirm Judge Bolton's decision. This is clearly an issue of preemption. The federal government has supreme power here in enforcing immigration law through the Supremacy Clause, and the federal government has acted very actively in order to enforce immigration laws. They have a complicated scheme of immigration classifications and enforcement scheme. So clearly the government, the federal government, has preempted the area. I cannot imagine the Ninth Circuit overturning this, nor even the Supreme Court. I cannot envision allowing 50 states to engage in their own immigration classification and enforcement schemes. So I know that this is going to be a long road. We still have a year, 2 years, 3 years of litigation. But the fact that she issued a preliminary injunction is a very major blow to this legislation. As you know, preliminary injunctions require that we prove a high probability of success on the merits at the end, and secondly, that there is irreparable damage, irrevocable damage, if in fact she allowed it to be implemented before her final decision. So we feel very confident in terms of the decisions that will be made by the courts. However, we are also very cognizant of the fact that the vast